Hello, I am the Flawless Walrus, and welcome to another Death Battle prediction video, but first we have Makima versus Gojo. Now, I went into this episode knowing that a lot of what happened was going to very heavily depend on interpretation of how these two movesets are going to interact with each other. So this one doesn't feel as bad as I would say Frieza versus Megatron did, because that one, it felt like there was legitimately stuff on the table that was just kind of ignored. Whereas this one, I am a bit more open to how they decided to interpret things. Though even by the episode's own logic, I don't think some of it really stands up as well, especially given the more recent events and such that happened in the manga. It's entirely possible that they obviously didn't have enough time to include the more recent events, but honestly, those events are more supplementary, especially when they already kind of came to that conclusion. Anyway, I'll more or less mention the spoilers for the manga, so go like a minute or two ahead if you don't want them. Because it is going to be kind of important in that regard. So, this is your chance to skip. In the manga, when essentially Gojo has now died, he died to what is essentially the exact kind of move that Makima's Bang attack is. They even came to that conclusion in the death battle itself, in that it is an attack that would be able to hit him. And it does pretty catastrophic damage to characters on the level of someone like, say, Power and above. The and above part is in particular worth mentioning because there are a few aspects of that really come into play during this fight. One of which is that the mind control resistance feat that they gave was from a considerably weaker mind control oriented feat than what Makima can do. She can control so many people at once and like significantly more easily than the feat that Gojo resisted. And then they made a large point that Gojo would scale up from Jogo's meteor feat. But that's kind of ignoring the fact that Makima also significantly upscales from the Typhoon Devil's feat. Both of them are significantly above what feats were presented for their verses, and the stat gap between them was only really like 2 times. So the argument that her Bang wouldn't really be able to put him down is not very well holding up when that is literally what put him down in the manga. So I kind of don't really agree with exactly what the winner ended up being. I think she would be able to mind control him. I don't think that she would lose the option to control him, because they kind of made a weird point that she would not see him as being above herself. She would. Especially with how he acts. There's no reason why she would see him as being anything above herself. Like, everything he does is more or less shit she's kind of seen before, for the most part, other than just like even telekinesis and shit is kind of stuff that's not that special in comparison, and that's how she would see something like it, like his abilities, is telekinesis for the most part. Either way, it was a good animation, felt really short, but also the animation did feel a little bit of an issue where it did feel like Gojo had a checklist, and that checklist wasn't even near done when Makima was totally blowing her best attacks. So it did really lead to the point where the second that chain went on him and you go, hold on a second, he hasn't even done domain expansion or Hollow Purple, you were just like, oh, okay, Gojo wins. It's kind of unfortunate when that happens, because it kind of takes you out of the pace of the fight. A little bit unfortunate, but what you gonna do? Ultimately, it was a good episode. I put it around the middle of the season, and as I've said before, this is a really good season for how good the death battles have been. So, when the most we have in terms of disagreement is one of them that's fairly questionable and one that's kind of more interpretation-based, and partially relies on stuff that did not exist when the research was likely cut off, yeah, it's definitely going to be a bit more on the good side. Like, everything is basically still really good. And thus we come to two good boys. We got Scooby-Doo and Courage the Cowardly Dog. This is going to be a really interesting fight for a couple of reasons. One of which is actually that this is one of the first times that I think the first time that we've had actual Toon Force characters against each other. Both of these two have kind of come back from a lot of like really crazy shit. But they still do have their interesting feats and whether or not they're going to be able to put each other down. And end of the day, I do actually think that Scooby is going to take it. I've seen a lot of people really trying to gas up Courage by talking about basically 3 feats in particular, one of which is it was like slinging a meteor. Another one was screaming so hard that the sun shattered. And then another time was basically walking onto the sun, into the sun, changing a light bulb in the sun, and then walking out. Now, walking on the surface of the sun isn't actually that crazy of a feat. I think it's like town level in comparison to all the other stuff. Shattering the sun by screaming, that's pretty good. However, that brings us to the Zabrinsky Triangle. That is a Scooby-Doo feat where Scooby-Doo, Shaggy, and a ballerina basically created a triangle with themselves and spun fast enough that they let off a light that destroyed the universe. Quite literally. Like, there's very few other ways to interpret that feat that aren't being kind of disingenuous. Like, we see an alien with the globe containing the universe, and it shatters. Yes, you have the point where, oh, but then it shows the characters again and nothing's destroyed, everything's fine. But the exact same thing can be said for Courage's feat with the sun. He shatters the sun, and then in the next scene it's back. That's just how cartoons are going to work. Like, at which point you would really be bringing them both down to significantly lower levels and ignoring half of their feats if you want to use the, well, it didn't stick argument. Because that's kind of what cartoons run on. Like, again, they used a similar feat for SpongeBob, for example. Unraveling the entire universe, it was back the next episode, so clearly didn't stick. I think that they're going to essentially take the Zabrinsky Triangle at face value, which would basically give Scooby a third of the attack potency capability of that feat. You could also apply it to durability, because he would also be basically point blank on it, and would be attributed a third. The other aspect of it, too, is that even if you were to only use the luminosity of it, similar to what they did for the Steven Universe feat, the energy output required for the light to be visible from outside the universe would still absolutely destroy the highest feat that Courage has. For speed as well, you've got essentially the speed of the Zabrinsky Triangle. That alone would probably do the trick. Courage is going to have a couple of MFTL feats, but you can also look at some really interesting aspects, like in the Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chase episode, or movie rather, not episode. They get put into a game, and there are some possible arguments to be made for that, where they are overcoming the reaction speeds of programs. So when something can have really fast processing speed, albeit with it being an older movie, the computer is probably not that great, but it would still be an extremely fast processing speed feat. And that's the kind of thing that gave Stitch the win over Rocket. So that's going to be a possible avenue of discussion. And then the other aspect is the good old Kiss movie. The Kiss movie also has Kiss as interdimensional magical girls, essentially, that are fighting a being called the Destroyer and I think Scarlet Witch. No, it's not Scarlet Witch. It's Crimson Witch, I think. Who are trying to destroy the dimension of Kissadia or something like that. It's pretty fucking bonkers. There are some people who would bring up the fact that it was shown to be not real in the movie, but at the end of the movie, Scooby and Shaggy go back when the rest of the group is leaving, and they see Kiss fly off with their magical powers. So it was clearly meant to be like a cover up that they actually are. So yeah, I honestly see Scooby winning. I think that there's not very much that Courage can do that would essentially stick. Both of them have come back from some pretty crazy shit. And the thing that I've seen a lot of people bring up is a mind control aspect with the God bone that Courage has, which is essentially a bone that a dog will just lick at the bone until they die of starvation. Two reasons why I don't see that sticking. One of them is that Scooby has actually resisted some mind control effects, usually for the reason that he's too stupid. And the other thing is that Scooby is very much known for eating. He doesn't lick a bone. He chomps that shit right away. I don't see it holding up to not only the level of power that he would have, but also his methods. Even if it did work on him, it would be gone in seconds. So I don't see that one working. I've seen an argument that there was a transmutation thing that Courage has, but Scooby has actually been able to act as other things. Like, he's worked as a soul. He's been turned into things. If I recall, in one of the Lego things, it was actually him being turned into it and still being able to act. So I don't necessarily think that turning him into something else will make him unable to fight. And it's not a permanent way to put him down either. So, speaking of permanent ways to put them down, they're both going to be having a lot of Toon Force and being difficult to put down, but Scooby does regularly deal with actual ghosts and has interacted with them in some of the older cartoons. Like, basically in a lot of the situations where the spirits were actually there. He's been able to interact with ghosts and could likely put down Courage's spirit, which would be something that I don't think Courage has ever reformed from. So that would probably be a permanent method of putting someone down here. This season actually has a lot of fucking characters who are really hard to put down for some reason or another. Lots of, like, Limitless for Gojo, Chosen Undead's constant reviving, things like that. Just lots of that. But yeah, that's all I've got for this one. The preview looked pretty darn good. It's going to be a pretty wacky one, if I had to guess. But yeah, that's all I got for this one. We will see for the next time. You guys have yourselves a great day.